It's not every day you get greeted by a bear, but up in the quiet folds of the Blue Ridge Mountains, there's a cabin where something extraordinary happens. Two black bear cubs, one bold and bouncy, the other gentle and slow, rush to the gravel path whenever a car pulls up. They don't growl. They don't bare their teeth. They hug. Point one grabs your left leg, the other your right. They lean in close, like furry little toddlers welcoming a long-lost friend. No growls, no fear, just warmth, joy, like they've been waiting for you. The internet calls them the gatekeeper bears. Locals call them the gentle guards. But to Walter Bennett, the man inside that cabin, there's something else entirely. There. Family. But these bears weren't raised in some luxury wildlife center. They didn't grow up learning tricks for tourists. Just a few winters ago, they were nearly dead, barely breathing in the shattered wreck of a wooden crate on an icy mountain road. And the man who saved them? He had nothing left. No wife. No children nearby. Just silence. Walter never asked for bears. Never imagined he'd be fighting state officials, building bear-sized porches, or finding pieces of his late wife in the gentlest one's eyes. But that's the thing about love. It doesn't knock. It just shows up. Sometimes in fur. Sometimes trembling. Always unexpected. And on that frozen morning, as he pulled two tiny, shaking bodies from the snow, Walter had no idea he wasn't saving them. They were saving him. Walter Bennett didn't mind the cold. It was the silence that got to him. Every morning, before the sun dared rise over the Blue Ridge ridges, he filled the same chipped mug with coffee. Bitter. Black. Just how Margaret used to make it. The cabin creaked with the same tired rhythm it had for 45 years. The floorboards remembered her steps. The kitchen curtain she stitched still fluttered when the wind slipped through the window crack. Her favorite blue mug, untouched for 3 winters, sat in the corner, like a ghost too polite to leave. Walter was 73. A carpenter once. A husband still, in his heart. But now, mostly just a man with no one to talk to and nothing left to say. His daughter, Susan, called once a week from Charlotte. Always the same message, different tone. Dad, please move closer to us. You don't have to be alone out there. But she didn't get it. The house wasn't just a house. The mountains weren't just geography. Margaret loved this place. Said it had a heartbeat. Said the trees whispered secrets and the stars were always honest. Walter didn't hear the secrets. Not anymore. Still, he stayed. Every Thursday, he made the slow, winding drive down to Miller's General Store. The road was old, cracked, stubborn, just like him. Especially the curve they called Eagle's Bend. It was sharp, blind, and dangerous. The kind of place that didn't forgive mistakes. Walter had driven that road 1,000 times. In every season. Through blizzards and thunderstorms. Sometimes, it was the only time he saw another living soul all week. And this Thursday was supposed to be just like all the others. But as he rounded that icy bend, something was different. Brakes squealed. A flash of blue. A truck twisted sideways. Across the road, its front smashed against a pine, steam hissing from the engine, and in the wreckage. A sound he'd never forget, that a tiny, broken cry. Walter slammed the brakes. His tires skidded across the ice-packed road, the truck jerking to a halt just yards from the crash. Smoke curled from the crumpled hood of the other vehicle. A small blue pickup, half embedded into a pine. The windshield spiderwebbed with cracks. The front end crushed like a tin can. Walter's heart thudded. He threw open his door and limped toward the wreck, boots crunching in the snow. "Hello," he called out. "Anyone hurt?" A young man, no older than 30, staggered from the driver's side, blood dripping from a gash above his eyebrow. "I didn't even see it," he muttered, dazed. "The crate, it just flew off the back. I couldn't stop." Walter's eyes followed the wreckage, a shattered wooden crate, splintered across the asphalt like a dropped piano. Broken slats, ropes, chains, and then a whimpered. He froze. Another cry, softer, high-pitched, almost human. Walter stepped closer, and there, tangled in the debris, were 2 bear cubs. Tiny, wet, bleeding from small cuts, their fur matted with sawdust and blood. One was trembling violently. The other lay nearly still. Their eyes met his, black, glossy, terrified. Walter's breath caught in his throat. "No, no, no, no." He dropped to his knees. One cub let out a pitiful growl, so faint it made Walter's chest ache. The smaller one crawled toward the other, their bodies pressed together in fear. Emergency crews arrived fast. Paramedics tended the driver. A sheriff took statements. But all Walter could focus on was the soft breathing of the cubs, fading with the cold. Then a wildlife officer arrived, Dana Wells. Late 40s. All business. She crouched beside Walter. They're dehydrated. Minor lacerations. But they're young. Way too young to be alone. What happens to them? Walter asked, not sure he wanted the answer. Dana stood. We don't know where they came from. Could be illegal trafficking. Could be relocation gone wrong. Problem is the state rehab center's full. Closest available one's 4 hours away. She paused. And if they can't be relocated? In time, Walter didn't need her to finish. He looked back at the cubs. The smaller one, despite the cold, had pressed its paw against his boot. Wait, he said suddenly. Let me take them. Just for now. Until there's a plan. Dana blinked. You? Sir, they're wild animals. I know, he said, already pulling off his coat. But right now they're freezing. And I can't leave them here. The shed smelled like dust and old paint. Walter hadn't stepped foot in it since Margaret passed. It was where she kept her garden tools. Her gloves still hung by the door, stiff with time. But now, it was something else. A refuge. He laid down straw, plugged in a space heater, and set out 2 bowls. One with warm milk and honey, the other with chopped apples. He wasn't sure if it was the right diet for bear cubs, but it felt better than doing nothing. The larger cub, braver, always sniffing, he called Moose. The smaller one, who trembled less when she was near him, he called Clover. That first night, Walter didn't sleep. He kept checking on them, bringing blankets, whispering softly like Margaret used to with stray animals. Moose watched him with alert, cautious eyes. But Clover? Clover curled against his foot like it was the safest place in the world. By the 3rd day, they stopped hiding in the corner when he entered. By the 5th, they came to him when he called. Come on, little ones, he'd say, his voice cracking from disuse and awe. Walter found himself smiling more. Talking aloud again, not just to them, but to the empty room behind him, as if Margaret were listening. They like your old sweater, he murmured once, laying it down as bedding. Clover nuzzled into it instantly. Moose was curious, always dragging things across the shed. One morning, Walter found his entire toolbox knocked over and nails scattered everywhere. What are you building, huh? He chuckled. Clover, on the other hand, was gentle. She'd sit beside him when he worked, rest her head on his knee, or bring him odd little objects, a pine cone, a glove, a leaf, as if offering peace. One afternoon, as Walter read an old novel aloud just to hear a voice fill the air, Clover climbed into his lap and fell asleep. Her breathing soft, her body warm. Walter stared down, eyes stinging. He hadn't felt this close to anything in years. They became a family, quietly, unspoken, naturally. Mornings meant breakfast and bear hugs. Evenings meant stories and watching stars blink through the trees. Walter started journaling again, something he hadn't done since Margaret died. He wrote about their behaviors, their favorite foods, even how Clover had taken a liking to a garden glove that still smelled faintly of lavender. And then one night, as Moose curled at his feet and Clover nestled beside his hip, Walter whispered, aloud into the dark, I don't think I'm lonely anymore. He didn't expect an answer, but he felt one. It was only a matter of time before someone noticed. Howard Sims noticed first. Walter had known him for decades. Retired postal worker, self-appointed neighborhood watch, always looking for something to complain about. One afternoon, Howard's rusted SUV came groaning up the drive, uninvited. Walter opened the door just in time to hear Moose's usual snort from the shed. You've lost your damn mind, Howard said without so much as a hello. You've got bears living in your backyard. They're cubs, Walter replied calmly. And they're safe. There's no such thing as a safe bear, Howard snapped. You think the state's gonna let this go? I already called Fish and Wildlife. They're sending someone. Walter's stomach dropped. Howard, they're not hurting anyone. Howard stepped closer, jabbing a finger toward the shed. It's not about hurt. It's about law. You don't have permits. You're breaking federal regulations. The man drove off with his jaw clenched and his tires kicking up gravel. That evening, Walter sat in the shed with the cubs. Clover was curled against his leg. Moose nudged a wooden block around like a toy truck. You hear all that, huh? Walter whispered. They're coming for you. His hands trembled, not from age, but fear. The next morning, the call came. Officer Dana Wells. Her voice was steady, but Walter could hear the weight in it. Mr. Bennett, a formal complaint's been filed. I have to do a site inspection. And if the cubs are still in your care after the 30-day mark, the law requires relocation. Walter didn't speak, just stared at the shed from the window. I don't want to do this, she added quietly. But I have no choice. He hung up without another word. Back in the shed, Clover looked up at him. Moose dropped a pine cone at his feet like it might help. Walter bent down and rested his hand on each of their heads. You saved me, he said. I'm not letting them take you without a fight. And for the first time in a long time, Walter Bennett, a quiet, grieving old man, felt something awaken. Purpose. The days before Officer Wells arrived were the longest of Walter's life. Each morning, when he opened the shed door to find the cubs waiting for him, he tried to ignore the gnawing fear in his chest. He continued his routine, feeding them, talking to them, as if the world outside didn't exist, but it did. The looming deadline, 30 days, pressed on him like a stone on his chest. He was counting down the days, and with every passing moment, his resolve grew harder to hold. Then, one morning, a knock at the door. Walter opened it to find a woman he didn't recognize, holding a leather briefcase in her hand. She wasn't part of the wildlife office. No, this was different. I'm Dr. Lily Hart, she said, with a smile that was kind but not overly warm. I'm the daughter of Margaret's old friend, Rachel. I've heard about the cubs. I came to help. Walter's heart skipped a beat. Lily was a vet, trained, professional, but there was something more. She had known Margaret. That connection to his past felt like a lifeline. I can't let them go, Walter whispered, before he even fully understood what he was saying. I know, Lily said softly. I don't think they should either. But we need proof. Documentation. Health checks. Evidence they're not a threat. Her plan was clear. If Walter was going to fight for the cubs, he needed to show they weren't a danger to anyone. Not just to him, but to the authorities. Walter had no idea what he was getting into. The cubs, wild by nature, weren't trained animals. They were just themselves. But Lily was determined to make sure the cubs had the chance they deserved. Let's start with the basics, she said, after a quick examination of their health. They're healthy. They're strong. They're not aggressive. But they need to be documented. And so, over the next few days, Walter and Lily worked together, taking notes, documenting every behavior, every feeding session, every playful interaction. They took photos of the cubs, Moose rolling in the grass, Clover nestled in the warmth of Walter's lap. They tracked the cubs' progress, every day spent together. But as much as they tried to prepare, Walter knew the real test would come when Officer Wells arrived. That day came too soon that Walter's heart raced as he saw the familiar black and white patrol car pull into his driveway. He stepped outside, his hands clammy, clutching a stack of papers Lily had prepared. He felt small, outmatched, but he had no choice now. Officer Wells was more professional than ever, her face hard, eyes sharp. I'm here for the inspection, she said, her tone clipped. I've received the report, and I need to see for myself. Please, Walter said, trying to steady his voice. You've got to understand. These cubs, they're not wild animals anymore. They're family. Lily stood beside him. We've done everything by the book, she added. Health checks, behavior assessments. They're not dangerous. Officer Wells glanced at the trap in the back of her truck, then back at the shed. Let's see what they've got. Walter opened the shed door, his breath caught in his throat. Come on, little guards, he whispered, trying to keep his voice steady. Show them. The cubs emerged, blinking in. The daylight, stretching like kittens waking from a nap. Moose stood tall on his hind legs and waved his paws in the air, just as he'd done 100 times before, as though expecting a visitor. Clover joined him, immediately flopping on the ground in front of the door, her belly up, blocking the way with dramatic flair. Officer Wells raised an eyebrow. They've got a routine, Walter explained, forcing a grin. They do this for anyone who's new. They're friendly. For a second, there was silence. Then, like clockwork, Moose rushed forward and wrapped his tiny arms around Officer Wells's legs, hugging them with the same enthusiasm he showed Walter that it was hard to imagine anyone would look at them and see. Danger after that. Even Officer Wells paused. She looked down at the cubs, then back at Walter. That's remarkable. But there was still more to prove. Can they follow commands? Officer Wells asked. If they're really under control? Lily nodded at Walter. Do you mind showing them how they respond? Walter swallowed hard and stepped back. Moose. Clover. He called softly. And just like that, the cubs padded over, their little paws quiet on the ground. Moose stopped in front of him, sat down, and rested his head on Walter's knee, eyes full of trust. Clover, just as calmly, lay down beside him, curling up at his feet. Officer Wells watched, her lips tight. Their family, Walter said again, his voice steady, this time with conviction. They listen. They trust me. For a long moment, the officer didn't speak. The air felt heavy, as though even the trees were holding their breath. Finally, she spoke. I've never seen anything like this. The days after the inspection felt like a fog lifting. Walter could hardly believe the outcome. Officer Wells had made her recommendation, but nothing was final until the paperwork cleared. Still, for the first time in weeks, there was a sense of hope in the air. The weight of the looming deadline had lifted, but now there was something else to consider. The cubs were staying. Word spread through the small mountain community. People who had lived nearby for years showed up with curiosity and cameras. They'd heard the rumors about the bear guards at Walter's cabin, about the strange, endearing rituals the cubs had developed. And when they came to see for themselves, they weren't disappointed. It wasn't long before Walter had built a new porch, an extension of his cabin, one big enough for everyone to gather around. He called it the Bear Porch, and he hung a hand-carved sign above it that read, Home of Moose and Clover, gentle guardians of Blue Ridge. Every week, families drove up from town just to witness the legendary greeting ritual. Children laughed as the cubs rushed forward to hug their legs, making everyone feel like a long-lost friend. Tourists snapped photos. Some even shared videos online, and soon the cabin was a destination. The gatekeeper bears had gone viral. Moose, ever the performer, developed a flair for dramatic pauses before his final hug. Clover perfected her blocking technique, flopping dramatically to the ground, then rolling over to stop anyone from getting by unless Walter gave the okay. They'd both been trained by nothing but their bond to Walter. And for Walter, life began again that he built a larger enclosure for the cubs. A space where they could roam outside during the day, with walls high enough to keep them safe, but still allow them to feel the wild breeze. Dr. Lily Hart continued her regular checkups. She'd become a constant presence, coming by to make sure everything was up to standards. There was no hiding it anymore. Walter wasn't just their caregiver, he was their father. And in a way, they had become his salvation. One late summer evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, Walter sat on the porch, the air rich with the scent of pine. Moose's head rested in his lap, Clover curled up beside him. Lily was in the kitchen, preparing tea, humming a soft tune as she jotted down notes from the latest health assessment. Walter looked at the stars beginning to form in the sky. There, light filtering through the branches of the oak tree above, that he thought about Margaret, about the woman who had taught him that love wasn't bound by species, that family didn't always come in traditional forms. It was the shared act of caring for one another that made a home. The silence that had once weighed him down was now peaceful. The house, once a tomb of grief, was now a place of laughter. The void that had been so unyielding for so long was filled, and with it came the warmth of new life. They saved me, Walter whispered. And this time, the echo that followed didn't feel empty. It felt full.